morning, lovelies. NaNoWriMo starts next month. Which means that you are all trying to outline your novel so you actually have a chance of finishing the story in November. Unfortunately, whenever I bring up outlines, I get a lot of, but I'm a pantser, or I never outline, or even Stephen King doesn't outline, so I shouldn't either. I got bad news for you. You're not Stephen King, and what works for him will not necessarily work for you. Every writer is different. If you have not tried outlining yet, I highly recommend it. You never write yourself into a corner, and you never have days where you wonder, what the heck am I supposed to be writing about now? Because you've got it all planned out. I'd say that outlines work for about 90% of people. It's just the amount of detail that goes into the outline. An outline is basically a map for your novel. It doesn't have to be particularly detailed. Mine are, but that's because I'm a diehard planner and I overthink everything. But even then, I usually throw it out halfway through writing the actual book and then I redo it because I've thought of something better. That's right, you can dismiss, rewrite, or even just throw away your outline entirely, but you should still have one. Even if it's just skin and bones. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. We are going to write a bare bones outline that is perfect for pantsers who want that freedom, that ability to just write whatever they want to write, go wherever they want to go in their story, but still have some form of direction so they don't get lost or meandering or have saggy middle syndrome or write themselves into a corner or anything like that. The source of today's video comes from Jessica Brody's Save the Cat Writes novel. Highly, highly, highly recommend. Make sure you have this, read it, memorize it. Alright, don't memorize it. It is like 200 pages, but still. This book breaks down how the 3-act story structure works, as well as all of the major beats that contribute to it. There are a lot of them, but for a simple, pantser-friendly outline, we are only going to look at the 5 foundational beats of a story. The catalyst, break into 2, midpoint, all is lost, and break into 3. Plus a bonus 6th point that I usually add, the climax. Think of your story as a big tent. Tents require poles to stay upright so they don't collapse and smother everyone. These 5 to 6 beats are the poles upon which the story rests and takes shape. Figure them out first and you'll have a much easier time figuring out what happens between those beats as you're writing. So the first thing we're going to look at is the catalyst, obviously. The catalyst is also known as the inciting incident, and it happens in Act 1, and it's what launches the main character into the plot. Usually it's something bad, something has gone wrong. The island or the magic is dying. The little sister is about to be sacrificed to the dystopian game show. The math teacher turns out to be a monster from the underworld sent to kill you. But that is not always the case. Sometimes a catalyst can be positive or neutral, like finding a strange robot that's carrying a secret message, or getting a new job, or shooting down a dragon. Whatever it is, it's a major oh shit moment for the characters and will later prove to be one of the most defining moments of their life, no matter how they initially react to it. For the author, the catalyst is part of the story's hook. It's the Joe Schmo was just an ordinary guy until ... That's the catalyst. And because it happens so soon, it sets the tone for the rest of the novel. Next is the break into 2. Break into 2 is what Brody calls entering Act 2, or the special otherworld if you're using the hero's journey model here. It's the transition between Act 1 and Act 2, and it starts us out on the actual story. Katniss gets on the train and goes to the capital. Moana steals a canoe and leaves her island for the first time in her life. Percy is finally introduced to Camp Half-Blood. Luke decides to rescue Leia. Hiccup begins dragon training. It's a very obvious moment in the story because it's when the change brought by the catalyst is finally settling in. It also determines the tone of your main character. Depending on how they initially reacted to the catalyst, they may be excited about this change or fighting it. Either way, in modern storytelling, they are almost always proactive about this. They are instigating it, they're assertive about it, even if they had nothing to do with the initial catalyst, because modern audiences prefer active characters. You don't want your main characters to be dragged along by the plot. You want them pursuing something or running away from something. Well, normally the break into 2 involves the main character going to a different place physically That's not always the case. 90% of Encanto takes place in one house. It's the situation that marks Act 2, not a physical location. Although authors do usually prefer having it happen in a different location, usually one that is very strange and foreign to the main character, as a very obvious metaphor about how they are now in a totally different world. Next up, the midpoint. Lots of authors dread writing the midpoint because it's so easy to get lost and meandering and go on tangents and just lose your readers. You end up with saggy middle syndrome, and that is going to land your book in the did not finish pile. But figuring out what your midpoint is before you start writing will help you prevent that. The midpoint happens, unsurprisingly, in around the dead center of your novel, and the best will have 3 things happen either all at once or in quick succession. The hero gets either a false victory or a false defeat, the stakes of the story are raised, and the main plot, or the A plot, intersects with the subplot, or B plot, in some way. Breaking these down, a false victory, as Jessica Brody puts it, is an incomplete victory. Usually this means they've gotten some sort of MacGuffin, alright? They've gotten something, a piece of the puzzle, but they still have farther to go. And sometimes there's a really steep cost to it, like a character dies. Maybe they got what they thought that they wanted, a new job, the MacGuffin, the magic sparkly artifact, or whatever, only to realize that it's not what they actually wanted at all, and they actually need something else. A false defeat would be the characters thinking that they've hit rock bottom, but they actually haven't. There's a lot farther to go. They're still able to pick themselves back up relatively easily and make a comeback. Again, character deaths often happen here, just like in Rise of the Guardians when Sandy dies. He gets better, I promise. Mission Impossible movies do both of these a lot. The midpoint is usually one of the most intense, memorable scenes of this franchise because it involves a heist where they have to get some sort of information or data or even prevent the sale of deadly weapons. The victories give them the information that they need to keep going, a false victory, an incomplete victory. The defeats allow the villain to get away and continue threatening the world. Either way, they're chasing that plot bunny to the next set piece. Next, we need to talk about stakes. The midpoint always raises them, making the story more tense. There's a reason so many character deaths or overall just general defeats happen here, and it's because the author's trying to convey to you how real those consequences are. Sometimes the stakes are raised because of a new deadline or countdown. The characters thought that they had a whole week to do the quest, but thanks to an enchanted hotel, now they only have a day. Other times we get a plot twist in the midpoint that somehow raises the stakes or reveals new information that really keeps the audience and characters on their toes. I give Sarah J. Maas a lot of shit for her writing and portrayal of toxic relationships, and she deserves all of that. But one thing that I will never fault her for is for her plot twists. She has some great ones, both in climaxes and in midpoints, where characters that we thought were allies are actually villains, or a character's secret power or backstory is revealed. Even when I knew that a twist was coming because it happened at the midpoint on the dot, I was still excited to read it, and I was blown away every time. Speaking of midpoint plot twist, Bruno. We actually meet him at the midpoint of Encanto, and it's a twist because this whole movie was setting us up to think that he was a villain, but he's not. He ran away to protect Mirabel. He's been hiding and keeping there to protect his family because he loves his family. And finally, the intersection of the main plot with the subplot. If the main plot is save the world story, or training the dragon, or a romance, or whatever, the subplot will usually focus on some other human interaction or relationship. Romantic subplots are very common here, but so are friendship subplots or family subplots, and they tend to bring the theme of the story with them, whatever lesson that the hero has to learn in order to grow and develop and become a better person. These two plots either connect for the first time at the midpoint, or they clash in some way. Hiccup's father returns from his failed dragon hunt, forcing the two to try to forge a relationship that just can't happen yet thanks to Hiccup keeping all of these secrets and the dragon training. T'Challa meets Killmonger for the first time, and this forces him to confront all of the themes that is about this movie, about, you know, responsibility of power and how you can't just be isolationist. You're connected with the world, so act like it. Percy and Annabeth open up to each other for the very first time after almost dying, running an errand for Ares, turning their alliance into an actual friendship. What usually allows all three of these objectives, a false victory or defeat, raising the stakes, and the intersection of the plots, what allows those three to happen are usually having a very intense midpoint sequence that threatens or even kills a couple of characters, and then the emotional reaction and fallout to that. Pinning down the midpoint will allow you to figure out all the stuff that happens between it and the break into two, as everything the characters are doing between those 2 points will lead up to the midpoint. Everything after the midpoint will lead them to all is lost. Most stories have a low point or a darkest hour where the heroes have lost everything, and the bad guys have the clear upper hand, if there are bad guys. It's total rock bottom for the heroes, both plot-wise and personally, and this usually happens at the end of Act 2. Maui abandons Moana, and Moana gives up the quest, begging the ocean to choose someone else because she just can't do it. Toothless is revealed, along with all of Hiccup's lies. Stoic disowns him and leads all the warriors on a dragon hunt that's ultimately going to get them all killed by the Dragon Queen. The magic candle is snuffed out, taking everyone's magical powers and Maribel's chances of proving herself worthy with it. Rue is killed, Miles Morales' uncle is killed, Gandalf is killed. If a character doesn't die in the midpoint, you can bet your ass that they're gonna die here. Either a mentor figure or someone else close to the hero. Basically, figure out what is the worst possible thing that could happen to your hero in this story. And then you make that thing happen at the All Is Lost. But after that, we break into 3. This is the transition from Act 2 to Act 3, right after the emotional reaction to All Is Lost. The heroes have faced their darkest hour, and now they have a revelation, a realization, and that changes everything. In mysteries or crime stories, the detective finally gets their hands on that last clue that just busts this case wide open. In action genres, the heroes rally their friends to confront the big bad guy, usually given some sort of speech about friendship or heroism or second chances or whatever. In romance stories, the hero realizes that they were in love with that person all along, and they absolutely need to tell them that before they board that plane and move away to somewhere else where they'll never see each other again. Whatever it is, the break into 3 usually happens when the main character realizes whatever the theme of the story is. They realize that they can save the island, demigod or no demigod. That it's best to be their quirky selves rather than try to fit in. That they need to face their fears or sadness or any other negative emotions head on rather than try to run from them or cover it up. This, of course, takes them right to the climax. The climax is pretty much the entirety of Act 3, except for a bit at the very end for the resolution, and as such it has its own set of story beats that I will save for another video. I personally like to have at least a vague sense of what the climax is going to be before I outline, because that's what the entire story is leading up to. I just like to know, okay, who lives, who dies, who wins the intergalactic war and who loses, what MacGuffins need to be used and why, that type of thing. And then I flesh out the details as I figure out the rest of the outline. But those 6 beats are the foundation of any story, and they're really all that's necessary in an outline, especially for pantsers. If you are a die-hard planner like me, obviously you can get a lot more detailed. You can figure out all the scenes that connect these 6 points and all that jazz. But if you're more of a pantser, give this model a try and let me know how it goes. And if you guys need any help with the outlining, the writing, or revising, my coaching services are linked in the description of this video. I will see you next time. Bye, lovelies.